Okay, let me be honest, because the problem is I know, and I know sometimes people hate when people say this, I know you're not a hateful person.
Right.
And I know that's not what you're trying to do. But it's a little frustrating because you're passing legislation about people's lives you don't understand. And the difference for me is as an openly gay black man is the world has somewhat kind of moved away from, we won't really bother Christian too much. He's fine because we've found another group of people. But at one point in time when I was growing up, I was the target. And I know how these people are feeling on some level, and you can never speak for someone else. So even myself, I don't know how to speak for someone who's transgender because I'm not transgender. I can't speak for someone who's non-binary. I can't speak for anyone other than Christian in my experiences. And it does feel like you're legislating from your point of life onto a group of people that you don't know, you haven't talked with them, you haven't done a study on, and it does cause real harm. That's what, wait, and this is where I'm gonna get to the question. Mom and dad have a child. Child says, I think I'm transgender or I am transgender. They are the opposite sex. And this is something these are cases that happen. Parent comes home because dad says, no, never gonna happen, that's my boy, blah, 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 blah. Mom is like, no, something bad is gonna happen. And then one day, one of the parents come home and the child said, they just start cutting it. They start cutting at their genitals. What do you do as a parent if dad says, well, he can keep trying to cut it because I'm not gonna confirm that this is right or this is wrong, and mom is like, this kid is gonna kill himself or herself, however they wanna categorize it. How is that not abuse if you come home and your child is literally continuously cutting themselves?
So that child needs help. What this legislation is doing is, all it's saying is, if I don't agree with the child's how they're identifying their gender, you just can't label that as abuse. Clearly, if a child is cutting themselves, no matter what the case is, whether it's related to sexual orientation, gender identity, or anything, it's incumbent upon mom and dad to get that child some help. So,
but if the parent is the one that's causing it, how is that not abuse?
That's it.
If dad says, no, you're going to be a boy, and mom says, I would rather just socially transition them, and because that's what happens. I know, not even going into the debate.
That's a totally different scenario
but
than what this bill contemplates.
A social transition is where there aren't any surgeries.
If in your scenario, and let's say there's a case before a state district judge with a family court, mom can testify with respect to the mental abuse that father is dictating on that child. That's totally different. All this legislation says, if I don't agree with the orientation of my child, you can't use that as abuse. In other words, mom and or dad can't say, well, my husband, my ex, isn't acknowledging my child's gender identity. And then the judge can't say, oh, well, gosh, you're not going to have the same visitation. Clearly, it's not debatable if there's a parent that's causing mental stress on a child that's causing them to cut themselves. That's a totally different scenario. That's not what this is. This is literally a disagreement between mom and dad and their child. And you can't call it abuse if mom and dad disagree with their child on this topic. So it's totally different scenario.
I get that, and I think sometimes people have different definitions of abuse, because when you're growing up like that, it does feel abusive. It makes you feel alone. It makes you feel isolated. And unless you've been 8 years old and saying, I love going to church, I love being with my family, and everybody makes you feel like God hates you and that's your favorite thing in the world, your favorite place in the world to go, and then you spend 8 years old till your early 30s where you finally stop hating yourself and finally stop wanting to kill yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what things like this do. And I'm not telling you that as in hyperbole. That's my life. Constant thinking, it'd be better off if I'm dead. The only thing I remember as a child that I hated was I used to say, God, why didn't you let me know I could have committed suicide before I hit puberty so I could go to heaven? because people always made me feel as though God continuously hated me because they made ways for me to hate myself through things that they passed.
Well, if anybody told you that God hated you, they're wrong, and they're not. And
But
that
what I'm
comment isn't
saying
biblically
is
based.
that's
but
what things like this do,
But
because it gives people the authority to use negative language towards other people. And I get where you're saying. I will let the witnesses testify.
Okay.
I'm just trying to give you.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not giving you the point of view from where your bill is coming from, because again, I'm not transgender. I'm telling you what happened in the 90s when I was growing up, when there were anti-gay and lesbian bills, and what it did to me. And I'm telling you the exact same stories that people in the transgender community are saying are the exact same things of how I feel.
Yeah.
And I want you to know that's just how you're making people feel. We wouldn't have 30 witnesses.
Well, look at it both sides then. This legislation also says that somebody can't accuse somebody of abuse because they're not acknowledging so this goes both ways. But to be clear, the Lord loves you and everybody else.
And we know that
whoever
now,
told you that was wrong.
But the problem is it feels abusive. It feels abusive to people.
But
I know what you're saying, and I know what you're going to keep saying.
all right,
It feels abusive.
I appreciate
and I'm
what you
just
said.
telling you how
You're
it
my
feels.
friend, and I
and
appreciate
likewise,
what you're saying.
So
Yes, sir.
thank you, and I
Yeah.
will stop until later.